So let's talk about some of the candidates trying to win the most powerful office in the world. Recent polls show Jeb Bush struggling to break out in the 2016 race. The former Florida governor has been overshadowed by other candidates in a crowded Republican field. But supporters say do not count Bush out just yet. A comeback is still very possible. An article in the Christian Science Monitor says, quote, Bush's dream of making history may be fading, but especially in this unpredictable presidential cycle, it is not gone. Shane DeApril is the publisher of Campaigns and Elections magazine. Good morning to you on this day before Thanksgiving, Shane. Do you agree with the premise? Can Jeb Bush mount a comeback?
Well, I don't think you can count anybody out at this stage, and the main reason for that, John, is what we know about presidential cycles, particularly late in primary cycles, is that there's a great opportunity for voters to break in a completely different direction late. We've seen it time and time again. We saw it last cycle, going back to 2003, when you look at the Democratic race that year, heading into 2004, and you had John Kerry, who was at about 4% in December, and Howard Dean led with about 23%. We know how that turned out. So there's great potential for late swings. That's one of the main reasons why you can't count anybody out at this stage, even as underwhelming as Jeb Bush has been as a candidate and as a campaign, frankly.
Yes. To continue that theme, 8 years ago on the Republican side, a guy named Rudy Giuliani was the #1 contender with 28%, and the eventual nominee, John McCain, only had about 12% at this point in the election cycle. So, yeah, things can turn around.
Yeah, and I think the challenge for Jeb Bush over these next couple of months is going to be, can he actually stick around through Iowa, through New Hampshire, through South Carolina? The rationale from the folks within Bush's campaign is that Jeb Bush is the guy who is best set up organizationally, financially, for a long-haul presidential campaign on the Republican side. So can Jeb Bush get into the month of March, where you've got all sorts of states voting at the same time? It's not we're not going state by state at that point. And can his deep pockets, the ads that his super PAC is hopefully will still be able to run for his sake at that point, can that overcome this sort of state-by-state slog that he finds himself in now? Because Iowa is not particularly hopeful for him. In New Hampshire doesn't look that way either. So the big question for Bush is, how far can he get, and does he have the staying power to stay in until he might be able to actually make an impact with that organization and that money in the month of March?
Yeah, generally Iowa and New Hampshire are considered the states that sort of winnow the field, and if we look at the Iowa polling results of late, Jeb Bush is not exactly up there, setting the place on fire. There's Donald Trump at 25%, and you see Jeb Bush way to the right of the screen in 6th position at 4%. Even if you go to his home state of Florida in an FAU poll, Donald Trump has 36%, Marco Rubio half of that at 18%, then Carson Cruz and the former two-time governor of Florida at 9%, just about 1/4 of the support that Donald Trump has. You still say, despite those numbers, he can turn it around?
It's certainly possible. I think Jeb Bush's biggest problem is clear. He is the ultimate establishment candidate in a cycle that is rewarding anything but. You don't get more anti-establishment than Donald Trump, who's been able to sort of set the grassroots of the GOP on fire to this point. So the question for Jeb is, when you talk to people who have seen him in action in Florida as governor, as a campaigner, they paint this picture of a fierce competitor, somebody who doesn't give up, has that staying power. If he can somehow demonstrate that and find his footing as a candidate, I think there still is a chance there, but it's a long hill to climb for him.
His supporters point to the fact that, the last time he ran for office, there was no Twitter, there was no Instagram. Social media just didn't exist, and that is something that Donald Trump especially has been able to harness to his advantage. He can sort of bypass the talking heads on the evening news and just say whatever he wants to say right to the people.
Yeah, it's true, and it does make a big difference, John, because in order to effectively leverage yourself as a candidate in this sort of social media age, there's got to be personality there. And one of the clear knocks on Jeb is that he doesn't really have the charisma or the personality, certainly, that his brother had on the campaign trail. He has a bit of a tougher time connecting one-on-one, and I think you're seeing that glaring in this sort of, new media age.
All right, Shane DeApril, the publisher of Campaigns and Elections magazine. Keep watching it with us. Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Next week, I will be joining President Hollande and world leaders in Paris for the Global Climate Conference. What a powerful rebuke to the terrorists it will be when the world stands as one and shows that we will not be deterred from building a better future for our children.
That comment got a lot of attention. President Obama raising some eyebrows, discussing the impact of climate change at the summit that he will be going to in Paris, which of course has been the focus of the world's attention for another reason. The president said that climate change was a, quote, bigger threat than terrorism recently. So let's talk about this. Joining me now, former Florida Governor Jeb Bush, Republican presidential candidate. Governor, good morning. Good to have you with us today.
Good morning. That, by the way, is perhaps the most ludicrous comment I've ever heard, that climate change is a bigger threat to our country than radical Islamic terrorism. It's baffling to me that the leader of the free world, the commander-in-chief of the greatest armed forces ever created, would state that.
You know, it's a question in some ways, I think, of tone, of urgency, of understanding what the people of France have been through. He's about to go there. They are still very much learning about attacks in Tunisia, other plots that are maybe in the works or are attempting to be foiled right now. Why, if it's true that the president is hitting a note that is just not where people are, why do you think that is?
Because he doesn't believe it's the most grave threat. I think he actually is sincere that believes that climate change is a bigger threat to our country than these barbaric Islamic terrorists that have as their organizing principle the destruction of Western civilization. Look, they've declared war on us, and we've responded as though it's a police operation. And we need leadership right now in the world to be able to forge a unified force to destroy ISIS and to destroy Al-Qaeda and the remnants of terrorism, and replace it with something that will create security for our world so that we can get back to the business of high economic growth and reforming the things at home so that people's income rise.
You know, he was asked about the coalition, and he got a little bit peeved. He didn't love this question, and I think that's reflected in his answer, because he's very convinced that he's already got a very large coalition, although most people are having a hard time getting their arms around where that is. Let's listen to this.
We've got a coalition of 65 countries. Russia right now is a coalition of 2. Iran and Russia supporting Assad. Given Russia's military capabilities and given the influence they have on the Assad regime, them cooperating would be enormously helpful.
All right, this raises a lot of questions. What would you do if you were president? Who would be in your coalition? How would you demonstrate that they're actually there? Because it's a lot trickier than it seems in many ways. And would you work alongside Russia to eliminate ISIS?
Great questions. And first of all, 65 countries in a coalition doing nothing is not a coalition. We need a strategy. That's the first and foremost thing that we need, is a strategy, a U.S. military strategy. And the strategy should start by asking the military advisors, the commanders, what are the options to destroy ISIS? And I think what they come back with is unleash us. Stop putting constraints on our ability as warfighters to fight the fight. Secondly, we need to build a coalition inside of Iraq as well as in Syria of the Arab neighborhood. We can't do this alone. That's clearly the wrong approach, but we can do it in unison with the countries most affected by the chaos in Syria. Thirdly, we need to get the European countries to participate, and we need to create safe zones inside of Syria for the refugees. That's the way you ultimately solve this problem, is support the local forces, the remnants of the Syrian Free Army, to build a force that will be effective in reaching a political settlement where Assad is gone and destroying ISIS. Everything else is just talk. This requires American leadership, and American leadership means a no-fly zone, safe zones, building a unified force that is effective, and creating safety for refugees so that we don't have a problem of refugees, terrorists embedding in refugees' populations and creating havoc over the next decade here in the United States and in Europe.
All right. I want to play some comments by Donald Trump, who is still #1 in all of the polls in the race that you are hoping to win. Here's what he said.
I watched when the World Trade Center came tumbling down. And I watched in Jersey City, New Jersey, where thousands and thousands of people were cheering as that building was coming down. Thousands of people were cheering. So something's going on. We got to find out what it is.
What's your take on this controversy? It's been going on for 3 days. And why does it matter, if it matters at all?
Well, it matters for the people that lost loved ones in the tragedy of the World Trade Center at the Pentagon in Pennsylvania to hear Donald Trump create an alternative universe. There weren't thousands and thousands of people cheering. That's just not true. This country was under attack, and people were angry and they were in mourning, but there was no cheering. Look, he doesn't know what he's talking about. His position as it relates to Islamic terrorism has gone from saying, we don't have a fight there, let Russia take out ISIS, let ISIS take out Assad, and now his strategy is to bomb the bleep out of ISIS. That's not a strategy. That's not leadership. That's not a serious approach to a hugely serious problem. So, look, at the end of the day, people are going to have to make up their minds. Do they want someone who can sit behind the big desk with a spine and with a heart and with a brain to be able to lead the country in a much better direction than we're going now? And I believe I'm that guy.
Governor Bush, thank you very much. You've got your work cut out for you. A lot of folks do over the next couple of months. We wish you a happy Thanksgiving, though. Enjoy it with your family. Good to see you this morning, sir.
Thank you, Martha. Take care.